welcome to Latina Say What Book Club story time. So y'all, I'm excited to introduce Latina Say What Book Club, which I've been doing before, but this is like the first time that I'm doing an actual story time, and I'm so happy to introduce the first book for Latina Say What story time, Plato's Republic. And I hope you all know who Plato is. If you don't, we can't be friends. If you do, I think you'll really enjoy this. So I'm gonna read a few excerpts, the introduction, and maybe a few quick excerpts in my own words. Those of you who don't know Plato, this will be a great way to get to introduce yourself to the philosopher, said to have been born in like 420 something BC. But let's just get into it. This will tell you all you need to know. So yeah, this was like one of his favorite books. One of his most renowned philosophies that he wrote. But yeah, we're gonna skip the preface that was written by. So this is an edition translated by GMA Group, whoever that is. I'm not familiar with the author. So it's just an edition translated into this author's own words. So we're gonna read it in my own words. So, right, let's begin. So I'm gonna read the introduction. Boom. Can y'all see me? Let's get a little closer. Let's get to know each other. Let's get a little more intimate over here. Okay, good. That's better. All right. Plato is traditionally thought to have been born in 428 BC, I told you, and to have died in 348. How many years is that, like 80? Correct me if I'm wrong. No, that's like 120. My boy was an OG. Okay, his father, Ariston, was descended, or so legend has it, from Codrus, the last king of Athens. His mother, Perictione, don't quote me on the pronunciation, because baby. Perictione, she was related to Solon, the first architect of the Athenian constitution. That's deep. The first architect of the Athenian constitution. Okay. His family was aristocratic and well off. I can read y'all. These are just really big words. And I probably shouldn't have had some wine before I started this. Or at least started with an easier book, right? Okay, so Perictione was related to Solon, the first architect of the Athenian constitution. His family was aristocratic and well off. He had two brothers, Glaucon and Adeimantus, Adeimantus, both of whom appear in the Republic, and a sister, Potin, whose son, Susippus, sound about right, took over as head of the academy on Plato's death. While Plato was still a boy, his father died and his mother married Don't look at me like this. The book will have me messed up. Pericles, a friend of the great Athenian statesman Pericles. Now, why they had no business naming these people this? Thus, Plato, who's the only one that got a real easy name, was no stranger to Athenian political life, even from childhood, because he was 18 in 409 when the Peloponnesian War with Sparta was still in progress. He almost certainly served in the military in that period. He may have served again around 395 when Athens was involved in the so-called Corinthian War. But why was it so-called? That's what I want to know. Given his social class and family connections, it would have been natural for Plato to take a prominent role in Athenian political life, but he did not do this. And in his 7th letter, written when he was himself over 70, he explains why. Why, my boy? All right, this is what he says. As a young man, I went through the same experiences as many others. I thought that as soon as I became my own master, I'd devote myself to public affairs. Now, it happened that the course of political events gave me the chance to do just that. The existing constitution came to be reviled, I don't know, something like that, by many people, meaning they quit it, so that a revolution occurred. And 30 rulers were set up with supreme powers. Some of these happened to be relatives and friends of mine, and they immediately called on me to join them on the assumption that theirs was the sort of work appropriate for someone like me. You know what I'm saying? Like, how dare they? It's no wonder, since I was a young man, that my feeling was that they would govern the city by leading it from an unjust way of life to a just one. Like, we're all naive in that way, right? We all have faith in political system just to find out. Anyway, stick to his words, his story. And I was intensely interested to see what would happen. But after a short time, I feel like I need to read this in a 300 BC Athenian voice. What do they sound like? But after a short time, I saw that these men made the former constitution seem like golden age by comparison. Among other things, they sent my aged friend Socrates, his homeboy Socrates. Plato and Socrates was homeboys, and let me tell you, they were smart. Whom I wouldn't hesitate to call the most just man of his time, along with some others, to fetch one of their fellow citizens by force, so that he could be executed. The citizen in question, footnote, I like footnotes. The citizen in question was Leon of Salamis. And that's crazy. I should have read the other footnotes. It says, okay, boom, let's go backtrack. The seventh letter, which was written by Plato, it says, I assume, this is our footnotes from the author, I assume that the seventh letter is genuine, but it may have been written by a disciple soon after Plato's death. So this was BC, right? So this is before Christ. These were like the first prophets, the first like righteous men, right? And, you know, Plato, if you know anything about Plato, they thought them up was crazy and off of his rocker up until after they unalived him, or he unalived, I forget how he died, but I think they unalived him or something. But it wasn't until then that they realized this was a genius and we should have listened to him. Like, imagine that. Plato's uncle Charmides and his cousin Critias were among these rulers, the 30 men, right? His uncle and his cousin, called the 30, or the 30 tyrants. Oof, sound like now. With Bezos, Elon, who else? The president, I won't say no names. Their reign lasted only about 90 days. Sounds like it's repeating history. Let's hope. Anyway. It's been about 90 days, huh? Boom, back to what he was saying. He said, but after a short time, I saw that these men made the former constitution seem like a golden age by comparison. Oh, my voice, hold on, so y'all can tell the difference. Among others, they sent my aged friend Socrates, who I wouldn't hesitate to call the most just man of the time, along with some others, to fetch one of their fellow citizens by force. So the citizen in question was Leon of Salamis. And they executed him, right? Boom. Their purpose was to involve Socrates in their activities, whether he wished to or not. He refused, however. Of course, right? He's a just man, duh. And risked the most extreme penalties rather than take part in their unholy deeds. When I saw all of this and others similar, how do Athens back then talk? I don't know, like great gods? I don't know. How would a smart man back then talk anyway? Like me, right? Proper. With a little gangster in him. Their purpose was to involve Socrates. He said, no, he not with it. Socrates was not with it. He was like, I'd rather do my time or whatever. Y'all can do what y'all want, but I'm not with it. He not with the ops. He risked the most extreme penalties rather than take part in their unholy deeds. When I saw all of this and their other similarly significant things, I withdrew in disgust from the evils then being practiced. Not long after that, the 30 in their entire, I need y'all to take this seriously, okay? The voice is, I'm trying to make it so y'all can differentiate between his words and my words, but I'm gonna need y'all to take this serious. It's a very serious book. Anyway. Boom, so he was in disgust. He was like, I'm not with it. Not long after that, the 30 in their entire constitution were overthrown. One can only hope. Then, once more, but this time more hesitantly, I was moved to the desire to take part in public affairs and politics. Right? As a young girl, I'm like, I hate politics. I don't want anything to do with it. It's stupid. But once you realize that if you just sit quiet, that's actually more unjust. And I think this was Aristocles who himself said it. I quote, no action is just as unjust or something as, you know, the injustice or whatever. Boom. So he's like, boom, boom, boom. They were overtaken, overthrown, whatever. Then once more, he's like, all right, hesitantly, he was moved to be a part of the public affairs and politics, probably because he realized if he didn't do anything about it, who else, right? To be sure, many offenses continue to take place in those troublesome times as well, and it is hardly surprising that during these revolutions, some people took excessive revenge on their enemies. But in general, the restored democratic exiles exhibited considerable decency. As it chanced, however, some of those in control summoned our companion Socrates before the law courts and brought a most unholy charge against him, one that he least of all deserved, for they charged him with impiety, and the people condemned and put to death the very man who, on the earlier occasion, when they themselves had the misfortune to be exiles, had refused to take part in the arrest of one of their friends. Dang, man. They off my boy Socrates, too. Just for not being with the bush. The result was that I, who had at first been full of eagerness for public affairs, when I considered all this and saw how things were shifting about every which way and at last became dizzy. So my boy Plato was like mind blasted. Like, what? He not with it. I didn't cease to consider ways of improving this particular situation, however, and indeed of reforming the whole constitution. You know what I'm saying? But as far as action was concerned, I kept waiting for favorable moments and finally saw clearly that the constitutions of all actual cities are bad. Wow, it feels like history repeats itself. And that their laws are almost beyond redemption without extraordinary resources and luck as well. He was like, you know what? All y'all got it messed up. And I ain't with none of it. So unless all this about to be, fixed. And that's how it is this day and time. Is that crazy? Like, if you think about it, I don't think any government is just that we live in. It all needs to be overthrown. If they come for me, you know why. They came for Plato's. They came for Socrates. They came for Jesus. They came for Bob Marley. They came for Tupac. They came for Nipsey. It's only a matter of time they come for me, but I've lived a long, beautiful life, so be it. Where was I? Hence I was compelled to say in praise of the true philosophy that enables us to discern what is just for a city or an individual in every case, and that the human race will have no respite from evils until those who are really and truly philosophers acquire political power, or until, through some divine dispensation, those who are truly in power become philosophers. That's what my boy said. Those who rule and have political authority in cities become real philosophers, meaning either the real philosophers take over and become in power, or the ones in power get some other sense instead of all that money and become real philosophers. Thus at the heart, okay, so that's what Plato said in his 7th letter. Back to the intro. Thus at the heart of Plato's refusal to participate and act actively in politics. That ain't a word. Politics. At the heart of his turn from practical politics to political philosophy and education, we find the enigmatic figure of Socrates. Philosophy for Socrates seems to have consisted almost entirely in examining people about justice, piety. I gotta figure out what that word is. Piety and piety? Forgive me for not knowing. Thought I knew it all. But if you know, leave it in the comments, let me know. Courage, moderation, wisdom, friendship, and the other conventionally recognized virtues. He is always asking, "Di esti," which I guess is like Greek or something, right? Well, it means, what is it? About each of them. So he asked that about everybody. What is it? And he seems to presuppose that there are definite, unique answers to these questions, that justice, piety, courage, and the rest are each some definite property or universal, some definite form whose nature can be captured in a unique definition or account. Socrates' method of examining is the so-called elenchus. We see some examples of it in operation in Republic 1. Polemarchus defines justice as giving to each the things he is owed. Are we owed anything, or do we owe everything to this great earth we live on, right? That seems incorrect, that we are owed anything. That seems selfish, and that's what led us to the destruction of this great land, has it not? To think that we are owed or own anything except ourselves. All right, so where were we? Boom. Socrates shows him this Polemarchus guy. Socrates tells him basically, like, bro, that's not what's up. He shows him that this is inconsistent with other things he firmly believes. The result is that Polemarchus modifies his original definition, and again Socrates shows him that the new position is inconsistent with other beliefs he has. That's what I'm saying, like, that can't be right. Like, we aren't owed anything. He's like, my boy, make it make sense. In the ideal situation, this process continues until a satisfactory definition emerges, one that is not inconsistent with other firmly held beliefs. Most of the definitions Socrates encounters in the course of his elentic examinations of others prove unsatisfactory, but a few doctrines do emerge unscathed. Among them is the quintessentially Socratic doctrine that no one ever does what he knows or believes to be other than the best, so that weakness of will or acting against what one knows or believes to be best is impossible. That's deep. The goal of an elenchus is not simply to reach adequate definitions of the virtues or strange doctrines about weakness of will. However, it also has a moral reformatory purpose, for Socrates believes that regular elentic philosophizing makes people happier and more virtuous than anything else. See Plato, Apology. So yeah, we're gonna have to read that one too, Apology. Indeed, philosophizing is so important for human welfare, on his view, that he is willing to accept execution rather than give it up. It is obvious from the Republic that Plato shares Socrates' preoccupation with ethics and with definitions, but it also seems obvious that he soon abandons or significantly modifies Socrates' method of inquiry, as well as some of his specific doctrines. After Book 1, for example, the elenchus is conspicuous by its absence. And in Book 5, 6, 7, I had to figure out how many Roman numerals that was. In Book 7, Plato suggests that its use on or by young people may result in their becoming immoral sensualities. Immoral sensualists. That Socrates seems to be one reason why dialect, which is a descendant of the Socratic elenchus, to be one reason why dialect, we all know dialect is, which is a descendant of the Socratic elenchus, must be practiced only by mature people who have mastered the mathematical sciences. In Book 4, a subtle argument for the tripartition of the psyche or soul, means 3 parts, right? 3 parts of the psyche or soul seems in part designed to allow for the possibility of some kinds of weakness of will. Well, isn't that the fall of all man, that separates the men from the gods as well? Most people don't have strong will, right? But despite these differences, Plato, like Socrates, is absolutely convinced that philosophy holds the key to human happiness and welfare. Is philosophy any different than religion? Because it seems like it's a foreshadow of what's to come when after Christ. You know what I mean? Like, they were all philosophizing on, the decencies, human decencies, and things like that. And then after Christ, or right around the Christ time, the focus is on religion, not philosophy, but it's kind of the same, don't you think? Anyway, I'm not a philosopher, or am I? Is absolutely convinced that philosophy holds the keys to human happiness, however. Socrates was one major influence on Plato, then perhaps the most important influence of all. But there were others as well. Aristotle, tells us, for example, that Plato was acquainted with Heraclitean, Heraclit, I'm not, that's what it says, y'all. I'm not making this up. It says Heraclitean philosopher, Cratylus, from his youth. Metaphysics, whatever. Anyway, now Cratylus, like his master Heraclitus. You know what? I wonder if that has anything. Anyway, believe that everything flows. Sounds about right. Heraclitus, everything flows. That everything is always changing, always in a state of flux, ebb and flow, right? And a similar doctrine is found in Republic 5, where sensible things and properties perceived by the senses are described as perceived by the senses. You see how they put that in there, like perceived by the senses, because there's other things that our senses cannot perceive that have to do with flow, are described as rolling around as intermediates between what is not and what purely is. Think about that. But whether or not this doctrine is the legacy of Cratylus' tutelage is left Plato with a difficult problem, for if sensible things and properties are always in flux, how can justice and other virtues be stable forms? How can there be fixed answers to Socrates' question? But I think there's one answer, and the only answer. But we'll get to that on another time, because we're talking about Plato's philosophy, not mine. But whether or not this doctrine is a legacy, blah, 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 difficult problem, for if they're always in flux, how can justice and other virtues be stable forms? How can there be fixed answers to Socrates' questions? And if there are no fixed answers to them, how can there be such a thing as stable ethical knowledge? It was reflection on these questions, Aristotle tells us, that led Plato to separate the forms from sensible things and properties. Metaphysics. That's metaphysics. The allegories of the sun, line, and cave, which divide reality into the intelligent, so the sun being the sky, the line being the horizon, I guess, and cave being land, which divide reality into the intelligible and the visible, sensible, seem to embody this separation, but just what it amounts to is a matter of dispute. After the death of Socrates, Plato and some other Socratics, wow, so you get that, people who believed in what Socrates believed in were called Socratics. People who believe in what Jesus believed in are called Christians. So this was the first, religions, right? Plato and some other stuff. That's why when people are so stuck on the Bible and what it says, I like to reiterate that there were other books, truths, knowledges, theories, philosophies before the Bible. That's why you can't be boxed in and box yourself into going by what the Bible says and exactly only that, especially the King James Version, because we all know he burned a lot of other versions just to have his published, right? Okay, so there were other books way before the Bible, way before even the philosophies of Plato, way before, back to the first knowledges, the truths, the Vedas, if you know anything about that. But let's get back to this. Boom. So after the death of Socrates, Socratics seem to have taken refuge in Megara with the philosopher Euclides, who was a follower of Parmenides. I'm finna name my child one of these names. Of Elia. Parmenides' doctrines are notoriously difficult to understand. Oh, we're gonna get into that next. But he seems to have held that it is impossible to say that something is not, for if it is really not, how can it be there to think or even talk about? If we cannot talk or think about what is not, however, then we cannot think or talk about a multiplicity of things, A, B, and C. For if A, B, and C are many, then they are not one and the same as each other. And we cannot say or think that. Mind blown. It follows that whatever is must be one. By the same token, what is cannot move or change. What is cannot move or change. For something moves if it is not now at a place at which it was earlier. Yesterday it was in Athens. Today it is not in Athens. Therefore it never was. Or it was, but it's not. So, what? Okay. And something changes if it does not now have a property that it had earlier. Yesterday was white, today is not white. And we cannot say or think either of these things. Well, they was just on some shit, bro. They was drinking the ayahuasca and smoking some herbs. These are some high ass thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Motherfuckers just hitting the blunt, passing that shit like, if it was not, then it was. But if it wasn't, then it is. But if it is, then it is not. And if it, what? Bro, I wish I was in a smoke circle with these motherfuckers. Euclides seems to have tried to combine these puzzling doctrines with Socrates' ethical teaching, arguing that the good God, reason, justice, and the other virtues are all identical to the one unchanging, being defended by Parmenides. The resulting metaphysical views, which means like metaphysical, what we can sense, right? Because there's other things that are not physical. Resulting medical, and that's so great to understand, is that they understood that there were other things that could not be understood or sensed, in a sense, if that makes sense. Anyway, the resulting metaphysical views find many echoes in Plato's writings, not that the least of which, what are we running up on 30 minutes? I'm not going to hold y'all too long. We're gonna tap out at like 30, 45 minutes. Because I know people are busy. But you can pause it, come back to this later. The resulting metaphysical views find many echoes in Plato's writing, not the least of which is the Platonic. Platonic. Does that mean Plato didn't around? Like a platonic relationship? Like he was celibate? My boy, I knew we had a lot in common. I'm liking him more. Everything I find. Okay, so Platonic forms seem at times to have some of the traits of Promethean being. When Plato was around 40, he may have made another journey away from Athens, this time to Italy and Sicily. It seems likely that he did so in order to visit the Pythagorean philosophers living there, especially the philosopher-statesman Archytas of Tarentum. Please correct me if I'm saying this wrong. Who is mentioned in friendly terms in the 7th letter. In any case, the dialogues clearly show the influence of Pythagorean, who of course came up with the Pythagorean theorem, the influence of Pythagorean doctrine, with its near obsessive focus on number and ratio as the key to reality, which is the golden ratio, right? Archytas himself, for example, among many other significant achievements in mathematics and mechanics, discovered the ratios that underlie the relations between the successive notes in the enharmonic, harmonic, and chromatic scales. One can easily imagine Plato seeing in such achievements the possibility of giving precise definitions in wholly mathematical terms of such apparently vague and evaluative notions as harmony and disharmony. Well, I just got goosebumps. Beauty and ugliness, maybe even justice and injustice, good and evil, and the other things of which Socrates sought definitions. So let's take a note. So when he says beauty and ugliness, referring to mathematical terms, so a lot of people believe that equalness, like having a perfectly mirrored face on one side to the other, is the definition of beauty. But like if one side was crooked and the other side was not matching that side, it makes you ugly. So I guess that's what he was referring to. trying to find the link between mathematical ratios and beauty and stuff like that, right? So Plato, that in any case, the Republic itself provides strong evidence that Plato thought that forms could be satisfactorily defined, not in terms of sensible properties, but only in terms of numbers, ratios, and other precise mathematical notions. Plato may have left Italy somewhat intoxicated with the possibilities of using mathematics to help solve philosophical whatever, and political problems, but in another way, y'all, it's like 4 a.m., the witching hour, so forgive me if I'm just stumbling over these words. But in another way, he was sobered by his Italian journey, for he recoiled in horror at the luxury and sensuality of the life there. And again, the effects of this recoil are palpable in the Republic and in many others of Plato's writings. So before I let y'all go, we're going to stop there on the intro, and I just want to go delve into the actual writing. And let's just pick a page, right? Let's just go to the first. Let's just start. There's a bibliography, the main argument of the Republic. So there's like a thesis or whatever on this. A bibliography. Let's just start at book 1 real quick so y'all can get a little taste of it. On his way back from the so religion did exist, but right alongside philosophy, right? Book 1. On his way back from the Piraeus, whatever, where he has been attending a religious festival, Socrates meets. Okay, so this is the intro to book 1. Socrates meets Polemarchus and goes with him to the house of his aged father, Cephalus, not to be confused with syphilis. Socrates and Cephalus discuss the burdens of old age. Cephalus claims that while these burdens are eased by wealth, it is people's character and habits that really determine whether or not their lives are hard to bear, not their age. Wealth is important mostly because it reduces the likelihood that someone would be tempted into being unjust because he is poor, and so lessens his fear of what will happen to him after he dies. But this leads in a natural way into a discussion of what justice is. For Cephalus has suggested in his remarks that it is speaking the truth and paying one's debt. Cephalus goes off to attend a religious matter, and Polemarchus becomes heir to his argument, as he will later become heir to his estate. There follows a lengthy examination of Polemarchus, in the course of which he is forced to abandon a number of views about justice he has adopted along the way. One of these, suggested not by Polemarchus but by Socrates, is that virtue is a craft or technique. An early word for technique, right? This is also assumed in the subsequent exchange with Thrasymachus. Who named these people? Thrasymachus is irritated by this examination and demands that Socrates gives his own positive account of justice instead of simply refuting other people's. That seems pig-headed. Socrates claims that he cannot give such an account because he does not know what justice is, and he persuades Thrasymachus to give an account in his place. The account Thrasymachus gives is that justice is the advantage of the stronger. The definition of justice means nothing to do with being fair. It just means the advantage of the stronger, or what, the richer and more powerful, right? Yep, that sounds about right. The justice system. You can buy your way out of bullshit. You can get a felony if you're poor, but if you got some money, baby, you will walk away. I know that from experience. He defends his account in 2 separate arguments. Socrates makes a number of attempts to refute these arguments, but though Thrasymachus cannot defend himself against them, they leave him unconvinced. Since Glaucon, Adamentius, and indeed Socrates himself are also dissatisfied with the outcome of book 1, we must wonder how successful Plato himself thought Socrates' refutations of Thrasymachus actually were. Okay, boom, so let's get into it. So it actually starts. I went down to Piraeus yesterday with Glaucon, the son of... So these are in the words of Plato, because right, he wrote this, right? I went down to Piraeus yesterday with Glaucon, the son of Ariston. I wanted to say a prayer to the goddess. Even they knew that women hold the power. And I was also curious to see, this is coming from one of the smartest men of all time. I was also curious to see how they would manage the festival since they were holding it for the first time. I thought the procession of the local residents was a fine one, and that the one conducted by Thracians was no less outstanding. After we had said our prayer and seen the procession, we started back towards Athens. Polemarchus saw us from a distance as we were setting off for home and told his slave to run and ask us to wait for him. He was like, "Hey, my boy, go fetch my ninjas. Tell them to holler at me." That's so crazy. The slave caught hold of my cloak from behind. "Polemarchus wants you to wait," he said. I turned around and asked where Polemarchus was. "He's coming up behind you," he said. "Please wait for him." And Glaucon replied, "All right, we will." Just then, Polemarchus caught up with us. Adeimantus, Glaucon's brother, was with him, and so were Nicetorus, the son of Nicias, and some others, all of whom were apparently on their way from the procession. Polemarchus said, "It looks to me, Socrates, as if you two are starting off for Athens." "It looks the way it is," then I said. I'm going to start talking like this, so if you catch me out in public speaking like this, mind your business. He's like, "It is what it is, my ninja. What's up? You see with your eyes?" "Do you see how many we are?" he said. "I do." "Well, you must either prove stronger than we are, or you will have to stay here." Damn, he was like, "We're going to put your ass if you try to..." What? Gang, gang. "Isn't there another alternative, namely that we persuade you to let us go?" Plato said. "But you could persuade us if we won't listen." But could you persuade us if we won't listen?" "Certainly not," Glaucon said. "Well, we won't listen, and you better make up your mind to that." Dang, they were gangsters with it. "Don't you know," Adeimantus said, "that there is to be a torch race on horseback for the goddess tonight?" "On horseback?" I said. "That's something new. Are they going to race on horseback and hand the torches on in relays or what?" You're like, "What's up?" Like, what? That's great. "In relays," Polemarchus said, "and there will be an all-night festival that will be well worth seeing. After dinner, we'll go out to look at it. We'll be joined by many of the young men, and we'll talk. So don't go. Stay." It was kind of weird back then too. They like young boys. They like young men. Weird. You already know Plato won't wait. He won't wait the shits, right? But like the boy said, there's more of them than you. Y'all gotta stay, right? He must have thought Plato was fine or something. Like, anyway, I have no idea what these men were thinking. "So don't go. Stay. It seems," Glaucon said, "that we'll have to stay." Glaucon was like, "Boy, Plato, if we don't stay, it seems, you know what I'm saying? We ain't really got no choice." "If you think so," I said, "then we must." So we went to Polemarchus' house, and there we found Lysias and Euthydemus, and brothers of Polemarchus. Thrasymachus of Chalcedon. Anyway, the Thracian goddess, these are footnotes, the Thracian goddess Venus, whose cult had recently been introduced in the Piraeus, the harbor area near Athens. Glaucon and Adeimantus were Plato's brothers. So Glaucon, Plato was with his brothers and whatever. So they're like, "Bro, we gotta chill." They are Socrates' chief interlocutor. After book one. Boom. All right, back to the book. Charmantides of Paeania and Cleitophon, the son of Ariston. All right, y'all, it's too late. The son of, y'all can read the book yourself. How about that? But I just wanna introduce you to these philosophies, which are like everybody should read these. Especially this is one of, like I said, one of his renowned books, right, by Plato. And Cleitophon, the son of Aristomenes, Polemarchus' father, Cephalus, who was also there, and I thought he looked quite old, as I hadn't seen him for some time. He was sitting on a sort of cushioned chair with a wreath on his head, and he had been offering a sacrifice in the courtyard. There was a circle of chairs, and we sat down by him. As soon as he saw me, Cephalus welcomed me and said, Socrates, you don't come down to Piraeus to see us as often as you should. I see why. If it were still easy for me to walk to town, you wouldn't have to come here. We'd come to you. But as it is, you ought to come here more often, for you should know that as the physical pleasures wither away, my desire for conversation and its pleasures grow. So do I. So do as I say. So do as I say. So basically, it was like, since I can't get down no more, you know what I'm saying? I still like to talk to you, my boy. Why you ain't been around? That's so crazy. So do as I say. Stay with these young men now, but come regularly to see us, just as you would do to friends or relatives. Indeed, Cephalus, I replied, I enjoy talking with the very old, for we should ask them, as we might ask those who have traveled a road that we too will probably have to follow, what kind of road it is. I love that he says that, because I am a firm believer in talking to your elders before they are gone. Your grandmas, your aunties, everybody who's older than you. Make sure you sit down and let them tell you their story, because a lot of times they're not going to tell it. But if you ask, they might. You know what I'm saying? You will learn a lot. You have no idea. What kind of road it is, whether rough or difficult or smooth and easy. And I'd gladly find out from you what you think about this, as you have reached a point in life the poets call the threshold of old age. Is it a difficult time? What is your report about it? By God, Socrates, I'll tell you exactly what I think. A number of us who are more or less the same age often get together in accordance with the old saying. When we meet, the majority complain about the lost pleasures they remember from their youth, those of sex, drinking parties, feast, and the other things that go along with them. And they get angry as if they had been deprived of important things and had lived well then, but are now hardly living at all. Some others moan about the abuse heaped on old people by their relatives, and because of this, they repeat over and over that old age is the cause of many evils. But I don't think they blame the real cause, Socrates, for if old age were really the cause, I should have suffered in the same way, and so should everyone else of my age. But as it is, I've met some who don't feel like that in the least. Indeed, I was once present when someone asked the poet Sophocles, how are you as far as sex goes, Sophocles? Can you still make love with a woman? What in the Republic? Quiet, man, the poet replied. I am very glad to have escaped from all that, like a slave who has escaped from a savage and tyrannical master. I thought at the time that he was right, and I still do, for old age brings peace and freedom for all such things. When the appetites relax and cease to importune us, everything Sophocles said comes to pass, and we escape from many mad masters. True story. So glad I'm past that stupid urge to whatever. But if we did not have it, would we reproduce and continue as we know man, right? We wouldn't, right? When the appetite relaxes and ceases to importune us, everything Sophocles said come to pass. We escape from many mad masters. In these matters and in those concerning relatives, the real cause is in old age, Socrates, but the way people live. If they are moderate and contented, old age too is only moderately onerous. If they aren't, both old age and youth are hard to bear. Yeah, so cool. I admired him for saying that, and I wanted him to tell me more, so I urged him on. When you say things like that, Cephalus, I suppose the majority of people don't agree. They think that you bear old age more easily, not because of the way you live, but because you're wealthy. For the wealthy, they say, have many consolations. That's true. They don't agree, and there is something in what they say, though not as much as they think. Themistocles' retort is relevant here. When someone vociferously insulted him by saying that his high reputation was due to his city and not to himself, he replied that, had he been a Seriphian, he wouldn't be famous, but neither would the other, even if he had been an Athenian. The same applies to those who aren't rich and find old age hard to bear. A good person wouldn't easily bear old age if he were poor, but a bad one wouldn't be at peace with himself even if he were wealthy. As deep. Did you inherit most of your wealth, Cephalus, I asked, or did you make it for yourself? What did I make for myself, Socrates, you ask? As a money maker, I'm in a sort of mean between my grandfather and my father. My grandfather and namesake inherited about the same amount of wealth as I possess, but multiplied it many times. My father, Licinius, however, diminished that amount so even less than I have now. As for me, I'm satisfied to leave my sons here, not less, but the little more than I inherited. The reason I ask is that you don't seem to love money too much, and those who haven't made their own money are usually like you. But those who have made it for themselves are twice as fond of it as those who haven't, just as poets love their poems and fathers love their children. So those who have made their own money don't just care about it because it's useful as other people do, but because it's something they've made themselves. This makes them poor company, for they haven't a good word to say about anything except money. That's deep. That's true. It certainly is, but tell me something else. What's the greatest good you received from being very wealthy? This book is deep, bruh. What I have to say probably wouldn't persuade most people, but you know, Socrates, that when someone thinks his end is near, he becomes frightened and concerned about things he didn't fear before. It's then that the stories were told about Hades, about how people who've been unjust here must pay the penalty there. Stories he used to make fun of, twist his soul this way and that for fear they're true. And whether because of the weakness of old age, or because he is now closer to what happens in Hades and has a clearer view of it, or whatever it is, he is filled with foreboding and fear, and he examines himself to see whether he has been unjust to anyone. Y'all better start examining a lot sooner than later. And that's one thing people don't understand. They think they can be okay that if they get wealthy any old way by hurting people or destroying this earth as we have all done. They think great because they'll live a good life in this lifetime. However, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So you are setting yourself up for failure, and your lineage, your generations to come, for failure, because you'll have to reincarnate and your energy is going to go somewhere. And baby, when you come back to this world, if you've done wrong, Trump or anybody like Trump's followers, if y'all out here hurting people, think you're gonna get away with that shit? No, baby, you're cursing yourself in the future and your future lineage. Let's see what they have to say about that. If he finds many injustices in his life, he awakes from sleep in terror, as children do, and lives in anticipation of bad things to come. But someone who knows that he hasn't been unjust has sweet, good hope as his constant companion, a nurse to his old age, as Pindar says, for he puts it charmingly. Socrates, when he says that when someone lives a just and pious life, so there's a little poem, sweet hope is in his heart, nurse and companion to his age. Hope, captain of the ever-twisting minds of mortal men. How wonderfully well he puts that. It's in this connection that wealth is most valuable, I'd say, not for every man, but for a decent and orderly one. And that's something. Wealth can do a lot to save us from having to cheat or deceive someone against our will, and from having to depart for that other place in fear because we owe sacrifice to a god or money to a person. It has many other uses, but benefit for benefit, I'd say that this is how it is most useful to a man of any understanding. A fine sentiment, Cephalus, but speaking of this very thing itself, namely justice, are we to say unconditionally that it is speaking the truth and paying whatever debts one has incurred? Or is doing these things sometimes just, sometimes unjust? I mean this sort of thing, for example, everyone would surely agree that if a sane man lends weapons to a friend and then asks for them back when he is out of his mind, the friend shouldn't return them and wouldn't be acting justly if he did, nor should anyone be willing to tell the whole truth to someone who is out of his mind. That's true. Then the definition of justice isn't speaking the truth and repaying what one has borrowed. It certainly is, Socrates, said Polemarchus, interrupting, if indeed we're to trust Simonides at all. Well then, Cephalus said, I'll hand over the argument to you as I have to look after the sacrifice. So Polemarchus said, am I then to be your heir in everything? He's talking to his daddy. Cephalus is Polemarchus's father. Well then, Cephalus said, I'll hand over. Wait. Am I to be your heir in everything? You certainly are, Cephalus said, laughing. And off he went to the sacrifice. Then tell us, heir to the argument, I said, just what Simonides stated about justice that you consider correct. He stated that it is just to give to each what is owed to him, and it's a fine saying in my view. Well, now, it isn't easy to doubt Simonides, for he's a wise and godlike man. But what exactly does he mean? Perhaps, Polemarchus, but I don't understand him. Clearly, he doesn't mean what we said a moment ago, that it is just to give back whatever person has lent you, even if it's out of his mind when he asks for it. And yet, what if he has lent to you? What he has lent to you, is surely something that's owed to him, isn't it? Yes, but it is absolutely not to be given to him when he's out of his mind. That's true. Yo, they was smoking some. They was on one when they was just sitting around talking about this, right? Because what are y'all even talking about? Then it seems that Simonides must have meant something different when he says that to return what is owed is just. Something different indeed, by God. He means that friends owe it to their friends to do good for them, never harm. And you know what? On that note, I'm going to leave us right there. Friends, I'm going to say that again. Friends owe it to their friends to do good for them, never harm. Okay, so if y'all want to be my friends, make sure you like and subscribe and leave in the comments if you like something that you heard. Make sure y'all read yourselves Plato's Republic. I wasn't going to read a lot into this, but you know what? We might have to revisit it on another Latina Say What Storytime Book Club, where we read whatever we want. And when I say we, I mean me. But you can read whatever you want, so you don't have to read this. But I highly recommend it. Highly, like 10 out of 10. Recommend this book. And I haven't even begun to delve into it at this stage in my life where I can more understand than I used to. So thank y'all for listening. If you stayed this long, I really do appreciate you. I love a good story time before bed. I hope you do too. And I hope y'all tune in for our next Latina Say What Storytime Book Club. And if you have any books that you would like to recommend, we got lots of them. Maybe that's just one bookshelf. Lots of them. That's just 2 bookshelves. We probably got, within all the libraries that I can get my hands on, I can't even count. So make sure you stay tuned. And again, if you got any great suggestions, I would love to hear them. But for now, peace. See you later.